My friends, when I say that it feels like things are spinning out of control, I'm not saying that lightly. I want to show you a number of Donald Trump's tweets, and like it feels like something's going very, very wrong. Just listen to this. Look at this. Look at the tweet or the Truth Social post that's on the thumbnail. Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone, listen to this, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. What? Okay, that's the president of the United States saying everyone should evacuate the capital of Iran. Okay, so let's try to recap here. Here are the Truth Social posts. This is the one that I just read. This is the one before that. America first means many great things, including the fact Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Make America great again. That was an hour before the last one. And an hour before that, sorry, this was an hour after the last one. Then, or about the same time, he put this out. Somebody please explain to Cookie Tucker Carlson, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay, so he said it a number of times, and I'll address each of these, but let's just back up. So the last video I just put out just a couple hours ago was how Russia just proposed to this children for soldiers prisoner swap. And then I also talked about the G7 meeting. And at the G7 meeting, Trump was over there saying things like, you know, Russia should never have been excluded from the G7 when it was a G8. And that's why things are the way they are. And he's talking about this. So I was like, okay, hopefully he can meet with Zelensky at the G7 meeting, and that'll be a good thing, at least, that something good will come out of this. Well, Trump leaves the G7 early. So no Zelensky meeting, apparently. Donald Trump will leave the G7 early and return to Washington, D.C. on Monday, the White House said, about an hour after the president said people in Iran's capital, Tehran, should evacuate immediately. Okay, so I'm not making this up here, and I'm showing you everything right along the way. Iran conducted another ballistic missile attack against Israel. Iran reportedly fired around 40 missiles, with at least 2 missiles appearing to strike energy site in Haifa. And there's another barrage that apparently happened as well today. And I was going to do something just about Israel, but yeah, this is bigger than that. Okay. So here's that one where Iran should have signed the deal, and I said it over again, and everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran, and people are getting out of Tehran, right? I mean, when you look at this, I'll show you that in just a moment. Meanwhile, like I'll show you the images of people just driving out of the city, the traffic, that sort of thing. In the meantime, Kyiv is also under combined ballistic missile and Kinzhal and drone attack. It's apparently a big barrage. I don't know how big the barrage is, but I normally am talking about what's going on in Ukraine. And if you don't know me, my name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context, and primarily about the war between Russia and Ukraine, because that looked like the thing that had the greatest potential to kick off World War III. I'm not exactly so sure now. I mean, it could be the Israel-Iran kind of thing. Don't know. Maybe it'll settle down with Israel and Iran. But between these two wars, these are really dangerous for the entire world's health. Okay, so Trump was saying earlier as well, Russian sanctions would cost the U.S. a lot of money. Now, that would explain why he is not actually imposing the sanctions that would drive the Russians to the table in order to create peace. So I just saw this the first time I saw him say that quote, so I'm putting this in here. Okay, back to the story with Israel and Russia. Here's some image of people trying to get out of Tehran right now after the president of the United States just said you should evacuate immediately. Civilians continued to flood out of Tehran tonight as President Trump issued an order to evacuate the city. An order from the president of the United States about Iran. Like that's something strange. The exodus started a few days ago, but recently accelerated. Look at the lane going one way and the lane going the other way. Like very few cars going one way. It's just backed up completely getting out of the city. The exodus started a few days ago, but recently accelerated as Iranian air defenses fell apart and airstrikes intensified in Tehran. So that's what's happening there. And okay, so what are the scenarios? Either Trump knows something and he's like, yeah, things are going to get bad, or he's just shooting off with his mouth, and that could be, but he's flying back to the U.S. and saying, guys, we're going to meet in the Situation Room as soon as I get back. So maybe he like knows something, or maybe he's crazy, or maybe it's a bluff. I mean, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a bluff, and he's just trying to foment unrest for a color revolution. By the way, if they do have a color revolution, I say pink, because I can't imagine that the Ayatollah would be pleased by a pink color revolution. Okay, anyway, back to the actual story. So they're trying to get out of Dodge. President Trump will depart the G7 meeting in Canada early, heading back to Washington, D.C. tonight. And then here we see President Trump will return to D.C., leaving the G7 meeting in Canada so that he can, quote, attend to many important matters, which was pretty vague, according to Carolyn Levitt, his press secretary. But when he gets there, the National Security Council will be waiting in the Situation Room at the White House when the president returns to D.C. tonight. So that's not a normal thing for that to be happening, that like, hey, I'm departing from this thing early that I was supposed to be at till tomorrow and be in the Situation Room when I get there. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'm just trying to inform you of what's happening. Okay, so again, here is the other post about, can somebody please explain to Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Well, you know, Tucker was such a buddy of Trump's that he was sitting in a place of honor at the Republican convention back in the summer last year. And he was around for all the festivities and that sort of thing. So what's going on with that? Well, Tucker came out and criticized him some. So Trump swipes at Tucker Carlson over Israel-Iran criticism. Okay, President Trump on Monday took a swipe at former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who has in recent days been critical of Trump's handling of the burgeoning conflict between Israel and Iran. Now, remember, Tucker's all in on this idea that we're not going to be involved in any wars. And look, I had this conversation with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who I went to high school with, who was saying, I'm not for war. Look, I'm not for any unnecessary war. I don't want a war. But at a certain point, sometimes you have to fight because it's otherwise going to fester and get worse. Okay, Tucker's in this category of no wars. Okay, I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go on television network and say it so that people will listen, Trump told reporters when asked about Carlson's comments during a meeting with the British Prime Minister at the Group of Seven summit. Carlson wrote that Trump was, quote, complicit in the act of war, unquote, and said what occurs next in the region, quote, will define Donald Trump's presidency, unquote. Okay, now, Trump doesn't like that. Trump likes being, I'm all about peace. So he's not enjoying that Tucker Carlson is calling him, a warmonger type. But okay. In a post on social platform X last week, Carlson called out warmongers who he said were calling on Trump to demand direct U.S. military involvement in a war with Iran, unquote. Okay. Now that would be people that are called neocons, generally speaking, more often than not, that are saying like, hey, look, you got to do something about this. This is an evil that you need to root out. Okay. Tucker Carlson is no longer in that kind of camps, and he's calling those people warmongers, as if they just want war just for the sake of war. They're just trying to prop up the military industrial complex or some nonsense like that. He specifically cited former Fox News colleagues, Sean Hannity and Mark Levin. Among others. Trump has danced around this question of potential U.S. involvement moving forward. The administration said Israel strikes on Iran were unilateral, but the U.S. assisted Israel with intercepting retaliatory Iranian strikes. So that's where we are at this point. I don't know much more. There's not more. I'm monitoring the news. I'll leave you with this last thought, because I think David French, who's a conservative who is not in the Trumpian kind of camp. He's kind of exiled from the Republican Party for now. He wrote this, and I thought this was really profound. The Ukraine war on October 7th should help us better understand Israel's decision to hit Iran. The Russian invasion of Ukraine should have woken us up. Nuclear proliferation doesn't just increase the threat of nuclear war, it can increase the threat of conventional aggression. That's right, because once people have nukes, they start getting really bold and aggressive. He wrote this, now imagine Iran, with an even modest nuclear arsenal. Even if it didn't try to obliterate Israeli cities, it could still use its arsenal to grant it a freedom of action in a conventional war that it currently lacks. Like Russia, it could be relentlessly aggressive at the same time that its nuclear weapons could maintain the regime, even in the face of military defeat. They would constrain Israel's ability to defend itself. That's right. That's what we're facing with potentially with Iran, but that's right now what we're facing with Russia in Ukraine. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. I'll leave you with this meme I just saw the other day, and I thought, wow, this is going to be useful. When you both know it'll end in disaster, but you just don't care. Crash test dummies in love. All right, my friends, I'll be back later on. I'll just monitor the news. Please subscribe if you're interested in maintaining, being informed. I do these regularly, day over day, and I want you to be informed. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about the world in which we live.